Call the regular council meeting of October 3rd, 2017 to order. In a moment, I'm going to ask that you stand and join in a salute to our flag. And then following the flag salute, I would ask that you would please remain standing for a moment of silence in honor and memory, and also thoughts relative to the tragic events that happened out in Las Vegas earlier this week. So if you would just remain standing for a moment of silence, I would appreciate it. So let's stand for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. And just a reminder to my colleagues and those in attendance to please shut down or mute your phone or similar electronic device. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of September 5th,
Second.
2017.
I'm sorry, second.
Thank you. The motion is in order. Any concerns or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. I entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of September 12th, 2017.
Second.
Thank you. The motion is in order. Are there any concerns or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Lastly, I entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of September 19th, 2017.
Second.
Thank you. The motion is in order. Any concerns or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. I'm going to be holding the executive session minutes as well as the other ones that are listed on the docket there. I did want to, as we begin this evening, the planning board is going to be joining us momentarily for a joint public hearing relative to the sign ordinance. However, before we begin the public hearings, I wanted to announce that if any of you are here relative to the continuation of the public hearing for a special permit relative to the BCWC Inc. to operate a registered marijuana dispensary. That public hearing is not being held tonight. It's being continued to the night of the 24th of October. They have notified us today that they are still gathering information. They are not ready to proceed. So that public hearing, if you're here for that, we will not be, we will just be continuing it. We will not be taking any testimony on that. Secondly, when we get to the council public hearings, there was supposed to be another hearing relative to a petition from Verizon New England relative to a pole, relocating a pole on Newport Avenue, and other poles over on the Angeline Street. Actually, what had happened was National Grid and had previously put in the very same application. Verizon and, as you know, utility companies share poles. We actually already voted on that matter. They actually had already begun the work on it. Verizon had notified the city clerk, I think it was late last week. So that public hearing is canceled because everything's all set for it. So if you were here for that public hearing or the RMD, you're welcome to stay, but we're not going to be entertaining those this evening. Mr. Jacoby, could you, I had already told them at 7:05 we were going to be deciding on that. Anybody has any other, thank you, Mr. Jacoby. Anybody has any more minutes for me?
In the interim, did you want to, is it potential to
No,
call
no, I cannot, because to do that I have to suspend the rules, and probably by the time we start.
No problem.
They were told we were starting at 7:05. I think I had to move them on the other side.
7:05.
Okay.
We could suspend the rules and have the public hearing.
about the auto sale.
Okay, here they come. All right.
How are you tonight?
That's a machine, right? Can you see the machine?
The small planning board tonight.
Four, there's five, there's five. There's five. Did you yell at me today?
Silly guy.
I've been here since 10 o'clock this morning.
Making everybody laugh.
Sorry about that.
Just get used to that.
So you have a quorum?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I was just saying that the first item of business is a joint public hearing with the planning board. So at this time, Mr. Withers, if you would read the notice for the
Yes.
joint public hearing, please.
It's a joint public hearing relative to amending, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 5, and Section 17-1.6, amendments of the zoning ordinance by inserting Section 17-16.0 signs.
Thank you. For the, on the public hearings, I will first ask those who are in favor, then those who are in opposition, and then those who are neither for nor against. So pick your appropriate time to speak. We ask that when you come to the podium, you give us your name and address for the record. And then any of your comments, please be directed at both boards, not to any one particular member of either board. So at this time, again, is there anyone here who is here to speak in favor of this item?
Good evening. Stephanie Davies, Senior Planner for the city. As you may recall, the Municipal Council held the public hearing for this sign ordinance back in December of 2016. Unfortunately, there's a 90-day time clock to render a decision from the time that the public hearing is closed, and that 90-day time clock lapsed. So as a result, we're back here with this new public hearing to correct that deficiency. Although it's been some time, the final product isn't really all that different from what was originally before you. The planning board met for several meetings, several hours, going word by word over this document. They spent a lot of time wordsmithing, making sure that everybody understood what was, being said. I know a couple counselors attended some of those meetings, Councilor Parika, Councilor Hall, and the edits in general were just more clarifications than substantive changes. I also want to assure you that during those meetings, we did take into account some of the public comment that was received back at that December 20th, 2016 public hearing. I won't go point by point over those comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions about specifics on those. What I can tell you is that we reviewed those comments. We looked to see how we compared with other communities in response to some of those comments, and other communities including North Attleboro, Taunton, Seekonk, Brookline, Newton, among others. And what I found is that we're really in line with what those other communities do. We found, for example, maximum square footage for the face of a sign or proposed limits on the numbers of signs were consistent with what other towns and cities are doing. And I think when a bunch of other communities are reach the same conclusion independently of each other, it's a sign that that idea has merit. So I also want to point out, we'd had one comment from Charlie Adler of the Land Trust. He had some concerns about his signs for Nickerson Woods, for example, and the types of signs that they do. And we did accommodate that as well. We created a new type of sign called an open space identification sign. So we feel that that would accommodate the Land Trust signs, that type of sign in the single residence zoning district by right. So hopefully you can see, if you've looked at the the revised ordinance, you'll see that we've taken comments, given them their due consideration. And also, please keep in mind that there's currently no sign ordinance in place for the city, and we really believe that this ordinance will help reduce clutter and distraction on our commercial corridors and provide consistency through the city. And that's it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Later, if you could just give to me or
Sure.
send electronically
Yep.
a copy of what you wrote, it'll be helpful in doing the notes. So, any questions? Councilor Conti?
Stephanie, thank you for debriefing the council and the planning board. In your conversations with those neighboring communities that you itemize, did you have actual discussions with other planners in those communities, or were you just doing a paper review of their existing ordinances?
We reviewed the paper of copies of their existing ordinances, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
No. Councilor Clayton?
Thank you. Thank you for coming in tonight, Stephanie. I've noticed where this has been rolling around for a little while that there have been some installations of signs in the community, and then I noticed that they're making changes to those said signs. I'm just curious if it's if we're making people aware of some of the potential clarifications now prior to them being.
I can tell you that working with the building department, it was a little confusing because technically, as soon as the first advertisement for the public hearing of the zone change appears in the newspaper, technically any new sign is sort of in a limbo period between the time that the ordinance is actually approved, if it is approved, and the time that the ad is in the newspaper. So generally speaking, I know the building department and myself, we've sort of tried to explain to people what the proposed ordinance has in place and try to encourage people to meet those standards. Then when the 90-day time limit lapsed, a couple signs came in that interim period, and then we had another ad and so on. So it's been very confusing, honestly, and I'm hoping we can get this in place to resolve that. But if it's a pre-existing sign and you're just refacing the sign under the new ordinance and under the existing zoning ordinance, you can reface your sign as long as you're not making it larger or whatnot. So I'm not sure that the specific signs you're speaking of, it may be a case where it's just refacing it, and it's permitted anyway, so.
Thank you.
Councilor Hall?
Yes.
Yes. I wasn't sure if you...
No, yes, no,
Okay.
thank you. I want to thank you for, when we talked about this at the very beginning, I knew there were some input and some very strong input of people that had a lot of concerns, and from 3 different individuals plus people that came out here, but I did get some written guidance, and one of the things I did ask is, really do an earnest review. And so I appreciate that because, you did speak about that and address that. So I wanted those individuals to know that when they sent it to me, I did send it with the message to please do a very earnest review on that so that their concerns were taken into account. I do also want to tell you, I love the fact that you did the comparison and the research. I think a very, very strong argument that when you have, we are looking for some kind of uniformity. So I appreciate all the due diligence that the whole planning board has done. It was a lot of work. I know we've both sat in for many hours, and these guys have been working on this for lots of time. So thank you for all the time you put in. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other concerns or comments from the council, or any questions on the planning board? Okay, thank you for coming in.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else here to speak in favor?
Good evening, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, councilors, planning board members. My name's Keith Hutchings. I live at 14 Wolfenden Street in Attleboro, and I'm the chairman of the Attleboro Zoning Board. First of all, I want to thank the planning board in particular and the councilors who sat in for their diligent work going through this. As I'm sure all of you know, something like this is a great way to replace sleeping pills usually. But they really did a marvelous job going through it and making the zoning board aware of the changes that, or the clarifications that came out of their discussions. As you may recall, this came originally at the request of the zoning board to the planning staff. Right now, signs in the city are dealt with as accessory structures. There is no right to have a sign in the city because of the way we don't have a sign ordinance. So by and large, like along Route 1 or along Pleasant Street or any of the commercial ways, they need a variance or a special permit just to put up the sign or replace it or repair it. What Stephanie talked about with the area being in limbo, we had Cardi's come in. They are switching from whatever they had an association with a furniture or decorating firm. They're going with a new one. Technically, because they didn't meet the requirements of the new ordinance, they would not have been able to put up the new signs. I think it's called Adamsville or Adamsdale or something. The zoning board worked with them to try and get around that because obviously if they weren't able to do it, the company they were partnering with would have pulled out. So we certainly are, concerned on the zoning board with making sure that the city stays friendly with business. But again, and again, one of our directives to the planning staff was we didn't want the ye old sign ordinance where, you can't have a sign that's not present in colonial times like Plymouth or some of the more restrictive communities. Attleboro is a vibrant community with a good business sense, and I think all of us here and all of you are concerned about that and making sure that we stay that way. On the other hand, as a resident, I don't want, just willy-nilly signs going up and that are unattractive, that are overblown. To me, I don't know about most people, but I don't particularly respond well when I see big, huge flashing signs competing with each other. That doesn't draw me in, that repulses me. So I'm less likely to go shopping someplace that has big flashy signs and, blinking and everything else. I hate to say it, but the first thing that started all this in the zoning board's mind in this most recent go around was one of the big signs, the animated signs on Route 1. I'm sure you all know which one. I'm not going to criticize them because what they put up was perfectly okay to do so, but I think it's hideous. And we've been trying to get away from that, and I think this ordinance is a good step toward that. And again, we're not going for the ye old thing. We want signs in the city, but we want them regulated. We don't want people building bigger and better because their neighbor built bigger, and so we're trying to come around with that. And finally, the zoning board, I think, needs some guidance. Right now, it is strictly the whim of the zoning board whether a sign goes up or a sign gets replaced, if it's a pre-existing one. Again, we try to be fair, we try to be responsive to business, but, it wouldn't take very much for somebody to say, oh, we don't want any more signs, so we're going to block it at the zoning board. And that's because it only takes one vote to block it. So without a sign ordinance, the standard that's used to appeal a decision of the zoning board is that we're being arbitrary or capricious. And without a sign ordinance, it would be very hard to defend that we weren't being arbitrary or capricious if we denied something. So I think we need some kind of guidance. I think this was a great step. And again, I commend everybody for going through it and putting up with this. I didn't realize, I just heard this tonight, I didn't realize it goes back to December. So the fact that we've taken this much time with it, I think shows that it's, it's been reviewed and it's been checked out. Yeah. Is there any questions, Mr.
Are
President?
there any questions for the speaker?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for coming in. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor? Anyone else here to speak in favor? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition?
It's okay if you, President, I'm going to slide over so I can see the video.
I would suggest anybody on the left side of both the planning board and the council. I wanted to see the presentation. You may want to slide over. Do you have some comments to make first, or?
I was going to give a brief introduction and then show some pictures.
Okay.
So for the record, Mr. President, good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board, members of the Council. My name is Jack Jacoby. Even though I'm wearing a suit tonight, it's because I have another hearing with a paying client. I'm here strictly as a private citizen right now. I live at 15 Prince Street, and I am concerned about this proposed ordinance. And I went to the trouble of not only studying it, but I had my son make a PowerPoint presentation for me, because we all know I couldn't possibly do such a thing. And so what I have for you tonight is a copy of my memo, a copy of the signs, and the notes that I made on the signs. So if I can hand these out.
Okay.
So you guys would need 10 altogether.
I also want to make sure that we have one for Linda.
One for Steve and one for Linda.
Are you intending to do the same one for
Yeah.
Linda? No, that's all right, that's all right.
Come back in.
Yeah, because I think that they have.
I gave him one.
Two more, all right? And 1, 2. Do you have,
May you have a copy?
Yes.
I want to start out by saying that this is not easy for me to do. As you know, I practice before the zoning board and planning board. I have the utmost respect for them and the work that they've done on this, and especially for Gary and his staff. But I felt compelled to come here tonight, as I did almost a year ago. Also, if this passes, I think this will provide a great deal of work for me and my office, because we're going to constantly be before the zoning board looking to alter a non-conforming use or seeking a variance for a business that feels it needs a different number of signs or a different size sign. But even against that self-interest, I felt compelled here. I want to disagree with Mr. Hutchings. Signs are allowed in the city. There's nothing that prohibits them. And I don't think we have a need for a sign ordinance. This strikes me as a solution searching for a problem. In 15 minutes recently, I was able to leave my office, drive over to Pleasant Street, and take pictures of numerous signs. Virtually every one of these signs runs afoul in one way or another of this proposed ordinance. I think the ordinance is arbitrary in its definitions and size limitations. I also think we're going to create a nightmare for the building inspector as well as the zoning board. Virtually every business that is in Attleboro now or wishes to locate here in the future. The building inspector will be spending an inordinate amount of time, in my opinion, measuring signs and then referring people to the zoning board with petitions to alter a non-conforming use or seeking a variance. Philosophically, to me, this sends an anti-business message. Businesses spend money on signage that they think is necessary and/or appropriate to conduct their trade. I do not believe we should be substituting our judgment for what types of signs they may have, the size of those signs, or the number. I also have a philosophical problem with choosing to regulate signs by zoning district. It strikes me that the signs on North Main Street are very different than the signs on Pleasant Street, Park Street, County Square, downtown, Route 1. And so I think that if this was done geographically based, and I think if it was made more flexible and less arbitrary, that there'd be something there. I agree with Mr. Hutchings that the animated signs may well need to be regulated in this city, but I think this goes way too far beyond that. And just in particular, Route 1 has side-by-side general business and planned highway business, and so it just strikes me as odd that there'd be one standard for a business here and the one right next to it might have a different standard. And frankly, I think that if you wanted to regulate signs in the downtown area, that might be, again, something that you might want to do to preserve our downtown character. But Route 1 is Route 1. And so what I'd like to do is show you a few pictures, and I borrowed the title of a song that was popular when I was young from a one-hit wonder group. I couldn't remember their name, but I Googled them, as we all do, and it was the Five-Man Electric Band, according to Google, and they've never been heard from since. So I didn't have to go, oh, is something wrong, Bill?
No, you have to go to the top.
Oh, I have to go to the top, okay. Let's see. Oh, definitely did something wrong.
Yeah, you should have let go.
To the rescue.
Sorry.
Son here?
Behind you.
I can see it.
There we go, okay. Okay, thank you. I'm technologically challenged, as you can see. Doesn't seem to be doing anything. Yeah, pressing the back button. There we go. Okay, so I didn't have to go far. Right at the end of my driveway, we have the sign for Beta. This is not a monument sign because there's more than 1 foot clearance from the ground. And it is not a pylon sign since there's less than 8 feet of clearance to the ground. So therefore, this sign has a problem. It doesn't conform to the proposed ordinance. In addition, it's not on Beta's property. It's either on my property or the one next door, but it shows you where to go to get to Beta in the back, and they have an easement over our driveway to reach the back. So according to the ordinance, you can't have a sign on someone else's property advertising your business. So then I turned around, and there's the church sign next door to us, and I said, okay, not 1 foot from the ground, not 8 feet of clearance, so it's a problem. So then I went over to Pleasant Street, and I saw the AutoZone. Now, if you look at the definition of a sign, it is everything. It's all the colors. It's everything that you see there. That red and white, the trade dress, it's all part of a sign. Since they have a pylon sign, I believe they're limited to 50 square feet. The AutoZone part probably exceeds that all by itself. And they have 3 wall signs because they have a side facing, what I'm going to call south, a side that's facing us, and a side facing Peck Street, and they have their trade dress and signage on all 3 sides. And this ordinance seems to think that there's something wrong with that.
Hey, Mr. Delacy,
You
any
passing
questions?
any judgment on it at all? I mean, the fact that it exists, that you feel that that's correct?
I
I don't
think,
understand. Would you, if you were going to recreate Pleasant Street, would you like that signage on that building?
I think if that's what AutoZone thinks they need to survive in this market, then yes, I think that's what they should do. I don't believe it is our job to try and homogenize Attleboro. We are not Wellesley, we are Attleboro, and I enjoy our diversity. I enjoy the fact that we do not try to homogenize people and fit them all into little silos. So if that's what they need, if that's what they think they need, I don't think I should be telling them, and frankly, I don't think the city should be telling them how to conduct their business. That's my position.
Okay.
It may be a libertarian,
just trying to understand
maybe a
your position.
libertarian position, and, you know, for someone who grew up as a long-haired hippie in the 1960s, you know, my friends would probably think I'm crazy now, but, you know, it's the way I feel.
So you feel no standard should exist?
I don't think we need a sign ordinance, and I think that virtually every sign that I found in 15 minutes ran afoul of this ordinance, and I think that they all become non-conforming uses, which is going to create a problem for us. That's the bottom line.
All right.
So, this thing will work. doesn't like my, there we go. So again, here's the AutoZone. Now, you'll notice that they have big wall signs and they have window signs. You can't have a window sign that exceeds 30% of the window. And so there's at least 5 window signs there that are in violation. Why we need to stop people from putting signs in their windows is beyond me, but if that's the judgment of this council, then that's the judgment of the council.
Mr. Lennox, could you come up and operate this?
There we go.
Just to be, so we can just move this
Certainly
along?
appreciate it, Bill, but again, this is the same thing, just another view from the side facing Peck Street. It doesn't like to move.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, so here's the gas station on Pleasant Street. And interestingly, the canopy sign is allowed to be on all 4 sides, but all of these wall signs and all of the signs in the windows and the signs on the pump all violate this. Bill? Here's another view of the same one. Go ahead. I don't want to take too long. This orange thing you may think is ugly, but the people who operate the business there think that it's something they need. The pylon sign appears to exceed 50 square feet to me. And that's what I mean about the building inspector having to go out and measure things. Bill? Again, this wall sign includes the entire face because it's got their trade dress and their colors. It's too large. And there's also one that faces Pleasant Street. Go ahead, Bill. They have a temporary sign. This is limited to 30 days. I can tell you it's been there far longer than 30 days. Do we want the building inspector out there telling them they have to take this sign in, and then if they take it in, is one day good enough and then they can put it out again? Or if they change something and say it's 5 1/4, then that's okay? I don't know. Bill? We went too fast, but the one you were going to see was the temporary sign for the flu shot. So this one, the pylon sign is too large and too tall. Next one. The wall sign is too large. Probably includes that entire green area there. Go ahead. Whatever you think of Kentucky Fried Chicken, that's the way they think they need to sell with their bucket. That pylon sign is too large and too tall. And the Dunkin' Donuts behind it, again, the same problem. Pylon signs are too large and too tall. Go ahead. You can't have truck advertising, so we can't allow U-Haul to park their trucks on the street there. Their pylon sign is too large and they have too many wall signs. Bill? And here's the same thing. That's an entire wall sign there. Bill? And there you can see all the trucks. And Bill? And again, the same business. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with their business. Maybe you do. Go ahead. That pylon sign is too large. Next one. Here's a real interesting one. Is this one wall sign or 7 on the Stop and Shop? We end up with telling Stop and Shop that this is wrong. Again, it's all my opinion. Bill? That window sign is too large, takes up more than 30%. Go ahead. Don't think the ordering board is allowed because it's a second pylon sign on the property at McDonald's. Go ahead. The window signs here in this business are a problem. Go ahead. This business has 2 pylon signs. Since they're only on one street, not allowed. There are numerous violations here at Walgreens of this proposed ordinance, starting with the pylon sign and its size and the wall signs. Go ahead. Again, the Walgreens, just too big. Next. At the gas station, they have 2 of these signs telling you that you can get your car inspected, and then they have 2 other pylons on the property. Go ahead. Too many wall signs. You can't say snack shop and service center, as well as all the other things. Signage all over the gas pumps. Next. You can see that they have 2 pylon signs there in addition to the 2 that tell you that you can get your car inspected. Go ahead. Window signs, more than 30% of the window. Again, Kentucky Fried Chicken, the Colonel, just not allowed. Go ahead. This directional sign. You might say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, the problem is that it's too large and it's too high off the ground to meet this ordinance. Next. You can't have a logo on an incidental sign, so Verizon can't tell you that it's Verizon. Go ahead. Again, too large, too tall. Morons can't have their name on the sign telling you not to park there. Ahead. Well, we skipped one, but that's okay. And then finally, the bank can't have its name on the clock. Thank you, Bill. So I have a memo here, and I don't want to go through and read it. You can read it at your leisure. There are, in my opinion, problems with this ordinance in that I think it goes too far. I think it's arbitrary. I think it sends the wrong message to business, and I would suggest to you that you send it back to the drawing board. If there was something that was perhaps done geographically, if there was something that limited itself to maybe just downtown or to animated signs, you might not see me here again. But I truly believe that we are going down the wrong path, and that this is going to create thousands of non-conforming signs throughout our city. And so therefore I urge you to reject this and not make it the law of our city. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Council Conti.
Thank you, Jack, for the time you put into this. I appreciate the effort. It seems to make sense to me that if we're going to establish a sign ordinance, that there would be a large amount of non-conforming signs, because this is the first time the city has ever seen a sign ordinance. So it's not surprising to me to hear you say that there's, it took me 15 minutes and I found 40 non-conforming signs. I'm not surprised by that at all. The sign ordinance allows all those signs to exist until they need to be repaired. And that means that there isn't a sudden flood of enforcement and replacement of signs just because there's a new sign ordinance. It means that the signs sit there until they need to be replaced or renovated, and the renovation costs more than 50% of what the sign's worth, and therefore it then would need to trigger the new ordinance. Signs, I think we both agreed, play a very important role in society in giving people instruction. And as we heard from prior people at the podium, it can get overwhelming. In your comments, I find some credence in the geographical argument that you put forth in your opening remarks, that there does seem to be geographical differences in the city. And I think that in time, the sign ordinance can be morphed to accommodate that geographical zoning. It's really not geographical zoning, it's geographical differences. And I agree with you, that Route 1 is Route 1. It is Las Vegas. Route 1 is crazy. If you're looking for something on Route 1, you better take your life in your hands while you go searching for it, because there's so much going on Route 1. It's crazy. But Route 1 is also a massively concentrated commercial strip. I mean, that Route 1 strip from the Rhode Island border to North Attleboro provides us with 37% of our tax base. There's a lot of activity going on there. I guess my feeling is, and I want your opinion, is that wouldn't the city be better served by having a sign ordinance and morphing it into a perfect ordinance over time than having no sign ordinance at all?
I don't think that we should pass a flawed ordinance. I think that this should go back to the drawing board, and there should be more work done on it. I just think we're sending the wrong message to business in this town. And yes, 37%, as you say, I didn't know the number, but I knew a lot of our revenue comes from Route 1. I think, driving around town, I think a lot of our revenue, more and more of it's coming from places like Pleasant Street. And County Square seems to be, not so hot anymore. But I just find it interesting that from December to now, so little changed in the ordinance that was proposed. But I do think that the size of the signs that are being allowed are too small, and I do think that there are two other issues that you raised. One is the idea that if a cost of repairing the sign is more than 50% of its value, that it loses its so-called grandfather protections. I don't think that complies with Chapter 40A, and I would think you would want to get an opinion from the city solicitor on that. There is nothing that I have ever seen in the law that
Jack, I don't
says
use
that.
that as an example to illustrate.
But that was the last point I think I made in my memo. And I also think that what's going to happen is that people are going to need immediately variances. They're going to ask for them. The Chick-fil-A that's under construction either now or very shortly in South Attleboro faces north on Route 1, south on Route 1, west and east into the shopping center itself. Why they can't have 4 wall signs is beyond me. I don't understand that. And it seems to me they ought to be able to advertise their business. So those kinds of people are going to be coming in for variances. There will be other issues as time goes on, as you point out. There won't be a flood tomorrow, but there will be other issues where we have non-conforming signs and a major change needs to occur because something happens in the plaza, something else occurs. The sign that's there, KFC goes out of business and somebody else comes in there, and so the colonel and his bucket are gone. Those things are things where they're going to be coming into the zoning board saying that they have a non-conforming situation and they want to change it. I mean, that's my opinion. This is all opinion.
I asked you for opinion. So, Jack, you're addressing a body of citizen legislators who are trying to gain control of an issue in the city. This sign ordinance started 14 years ago when Helen Urban, Richard Conti, Keith Hutchins, Tom Smith, and I forget who the 5th member of the zoning board was at the time, spent 3 years writing a sign ordinance. And 12 years ago, presented it to Mr. Cook to be put forth into legislation. If we follow your suggestion that we go back to the drawing board and work on this, we're not going to see a sign ordinance anytime soon. This body of citizen legislators have made an earnest effort to make a start at regulating something important to the city like signs. I shudder to think that if we were to go back to the drawing board and start from scratch, how long it would take to get back to this point. Whereas if we're at this point now, we could seize this opportunity to push something forward and alter it going forward as issues arise. I'm not afraid of the work. I don't think anyone here is afraid of the work. And I don't think it's an onerous burden on the municipality to make this effort. So I guess I respectfully disagree with you, Mr. Jacoby. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Have you a question over here?
No,
Of the hall?
Yes, I have a question. I know that anybody can answer this, I guess. I did speak, I thought that it might be an idea to think about, to look at things from a geographical standpoint based on what Mr. Jacoby said, and also looking at the Route 1 being a different sort of geographical area of the city. I'm just wondering, what was your logic on that? If somebody could answer for me. I would just like to know what was your, I mean, I'm neutral about it, I just want to know.
Are you asking Mr. Jacoby that question?
I can ask Mr. Denisi.
Well, I mean, part of the problem is we'd have to set up multiple zoning districts. You know, you'd have 18 zoning districts. Each one with their own, you know, then you have to start breaking it all down. It's not just signs. Now you gotta deal with, you know, size of buildings, frontage, setbacks. I mean, it'd be a nightmare.
Okay, yep, I just
So
want,
we
yep, you thought
decided
about
the
it?
best thing
Okay.
to adopt the model that seems to be more in play, at least in the cities and towns that we looked at, to adopt the ordinances that, you know, similar ordinances that they have.
Thank you.
So it's more by type of business and so forth.
Mr. Denisi, I just want to try I understood you correctly. So is the geographic something that the planning board looked at while you're working on that, or is this just your response at this point?
We discussed it.
You did discuss
We
it,
said,
okay. I just want a clarification on whether or not you
We tried to
discussed
set up
it.
the table of uses for each zoning district and types of signs and types of business. If you start to break that down beyond the existing zoning districts, and that's one of the only options you have is to expand the zoning districts.
Okay.
So now you'd have a zoning district for Pleasant Street.
No, I get that. I'm just
I got
curious,
it.
I was just curious to respond to Councilor
thank
Hall's
you.
question, if it's something that had been looked at, or if this is a new thing, so. Are there any other questions, Mr. Jacoby?
May I respond to
Yes, you
that?
may.
I disagree with you, Chairman Denisi. I think that we could create an overlay district, so we didn't have to touch anything else in the zoning ordinance, but we could create an overlay district that simply went by geography and said that the Route 1 area was one sign district, and downtown was another, and Pleasant Street might be another, and the rest of the city was the fourth. I do not believe it would be difficult to do, but again, we have a basic philosophical disagreement here, and so we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Jacoby in his presentation? Yes.
Jack, I know you have this idea that businesses know best, but as a citizen of the town, I don't have a business here in town, but as a citizen of the town, I find some signs are very, it's not just distracting, but they're very visually impairing. You know, you have a beautiful vista on County Street where Slater Park is, or not Slater Park, where the Caper Park is, and you're going down the street, and all of a sudden there's a huge domino sign that just dominates the whole street. Or we have a beautiful area where Colonel Blackington is, and some of the signage where CVS is very disruptive, I think, of the kind of characterization of the rest of the character that the rest of the vicinity has. So you would still suggest that there should be no change to that businesses should just do what they want, no matter how much it destroys the character of certain parts of the city?
Well, you've tried to give me the answer to your question in the way you asked it. So let me just say that I think that North Main Street is different than Pleasant Street. And I think that the CVS there is probably jarring, and their signage probably should have been regulated in some way because of where they were, but at the time they were built, we didn't have such an ordinance. But I don't think that we should be quite so arbitrary in the number of wall signs that you can have, in the size of those wall signs. If you've got a wall and you want to cover it, you want to cover it. That's just my opinion. But I truly believe that we should be sending the right message to business, that they're welcome here and that we're not going to regulate their signs, and we're not going to try and make our community homogeneous. That's just my opinion.
Do you think that communities like Newton or Wellesley or wherever, you think those are homogeneous? You think they don't attract business?
I think that a place like Wellesley that tries to put clamps on business, that's maybe, I don't know. All I can tell you, though, is that my mother always told me that if your friends jumped off the roof, you shouldn't follow them. And so I think that, you know, just because other communities have chosen to regulate signs doesn't mean that we need to. I love this city. I love the way it looks. I love its diversity. Yes, some things are a little jarring to me personally, but I just believe that we're going too far in this ordinance.
Okay, Mr. Denisi, and then Ms.
Okay.
Fraker. Ms. Fraker,
Oh, thank you very much.
and then Mr. Denisi.
Oh, thank you. First of all, thank your son. He did a really nice job on the PowerPoint presentation. I appreciate that very much because I need to see the practical application of exactly what I could read the ordinance for days and still not be able to have it like a visual understanding of it. So I appreciate that. You know, it's interesting, the city of Plymouth or town of Plymouth has been brought up a couple times. They have a very diverse community. It's the largest town in the country, and one section is heavily regulated as to signage because they want to keep that, you know, historical, unique, quaint. But then they also have a huge brand new shopping plaza that has, you know, Ulta and Michael's and all of those kinds of things that have the same signage that they have every place else. So I think that your overlay suggestion is a good suggestion. And if you had the opportunity to give like the top five things that you would like to see addressed, I mean, you have a variety of things in here. What would those be?
It would be the overlay district, do it by geography. It would be to heavily regulate flashing animated signs. It would be to allow more wall signs. And with regard to pylon signs, I probably would not relate it to the frontage on the street or the face of the building size, but probably relate it to how many businesses were actually in the plaza and how many needed that. I would also get rid of the window signs because I think that they are something that I don't think they add to the visual pollution that some people seem to be concerned about. And I think that, though, that, for instance, I don't think that McDonald's having that board in the back that you order from is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. And so I think that the number of pylon signs and how they're arranged is probably the last thing that I would cite. But those are probably the top 5 things that are of concern to me. I think that you know, there are some of my clients in South Attleboro have shopping centers that have 20 different businesses in it. And some places have 2 businesses in a little plaza. And we're regulating them all the same. One size doesn't fit all.
I think that, if I may, yeah, thank you very much. There's a lot of information in both the ordinance and in your response to the ordinance. And I think to make the appropriate changes in the time frame that we have, so that we might be able to actually get a signed ordinance on the book, but address those particular concerns, which I think are reasonable. I think about the bodega across the street; their entire windows are signed. You know, it doesn't mean you can't see out when you're inside; you just can't see in. And I think there are reasons for that. I think there are security reasons for that. I think there's a variety of reasons why, if that is something that a business owner chooses to do, we should allow them to be able to do those kinds of things. But if we have again, that's why I asked for your top 5 or 6. 6 is fine too.
6.
It was 6. That's fine. I think that that kind of breaks it down a little bit for the ability for us to make appropriate change to make the sign ordinance as it stands right now something that we might be able to work in a parameter that you might be okay with.
And I appreciate you asking me that, and you know that whenever you tell a lawyer 3, he'll do 4, or 5, he'll do 6. That's just the nature. We were trained
You
that
give an
way.
inch and we take a mile. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Denisi.
Mr. Jacoby, you know, you're familiar with the site plan review.
Yeah.
We put that in, you know, as an ordinance 6 years ago. And over that time, we've tried to use site plan review as a means of trying to, along with the zoning board, try to bring a semblance of fit to the neighborhood, to the environment, and indirectly try to manage signs, architecture, layout, green space, whatever, to try to make it more compatible with the environment that it's in. And you have a major client that's been through that process a number of times. And it seems to be working, and we seem to have a situation now where we have gotten a little more control over signage. So I'm surprised to find that you're so negative on trying to get some more compatibility with signs in neighborhoods. I'm just,
If you really want me to tell you what I think of the site plan review
Sure.
ordinance?
Might as well.
I think it goes too far. I think that trying to make things homogeneous and all, I just think it goes too far, but that's just me. And I will say, however, that site plan review ordinance, in the way it's been applied, has changed from the beginning. And I give credit to your board for understanding that and dealing with it in a way that now makes some more sense than if you just read the text. So I'll grant you that. I've not had a problem with anything that your board has done, if any of the projects I've brought before it.
Okay, are there any other questions for Mr. Jacoby on the sign ordinance, on his presentation? Ms. Holm?
I'll try not to belabor it, but I think a good point was brought up that I want to speak to. If somebody did come in and gave you, like the site plan review, let's just take that, because I've been through that process, and somebody brings up a good reason why something needs to happen, it's considered very carefully. For instance, security. What if somebody came in and they gave you a valid reason or, a considerable reason, something for consideration? What's the process to consider that? And could you then grant a waiver for that? Is there a process to allow that to happen? Mr. Denisi. Sorry.
Yeah, there's always an option to request a waiver and obtain that waiver if there's reason to grant it. I mean, the question, in terms of electronic signs, we try to adopt the national standards for electronic signs. It actually exists. So, in terms of foot candles and, how it projects so many, the distance, night and versus day, et cetera. So we've tried to put that into this ordinance to try to bring some application that's generally accepted, in the industries.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the sign, Mr. Jacoby and then Councilor
If I just could briefly respond to
Yes.
that, Councilor Hall. One of the things that we have is when it's part of a zoning ordinance, is that in order to get a variance, we have to show that there is something about the shape, soil conditions, or topography that causes a hardship. There is no way that you could technically get a sign variance. So one of the things that we might add to our list is to put in a variance procedure and give some instruction to the zoning board as to what standards they might consider when deciding to allow a varied sign. Because there is nothing in the proposed ordinance that allows that, and there is nothing in Chapter 40A that would allow a variance. I can tell you, however, that practicing in other communities, I've gotten sign variances in Seekonk and sign variances in North Attleboro, sign variances in Norton, all because the board realized that they needed to do that, but they had no legal authority. If anyone appealed it, we would lose. If I can add a seventh thing to Councilor Parica's list that she asked me for, it might be to put in a variance procedure and instruct the zoning board as to what standards they should apply in allowing someone to perhaps have 3 wall signs, or 4, or 2, as opposed to 1.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Reynolds?
So I have a question for Jack and for the planning board. I like the idea of an overlay, I do. And my thought is that certainly I live in South Attleboro and I've seen a lot of changes in the 32 years that I've lived there. I mean, it used to be almost farmland, and we were just talking about that earlier tonight, that now it's really congested and there's a lot of signs. You almost become immune to it, quite honestly, when you live there, because you're not looking at it anymore. You're just getting where you're going and you move on your way. But my question to you is, Jack, being both an attorney and a resident of the city, have you had an opportunity to discuss some of the things that are concerning you as a resident to some of the people that you know that own businesses? Is that what made you say, geez, I'm going to take a better look at this? Or did you just walk out your front door and notice it yourself? Because I'll say that when you came in here tonight and did this, I really didn't see all of the things that you were saying. And when it's pointed out to you like that in a visual manner, you're almost like, well, wow, that's a lot of difference that we're trying to make. And I think, like you, many of us love this city too, and it's not that we want to change it overall, but did you get some other concerns? Did you talk to other people in your neighborhood or anything?
I didn't speak to any of my neighbors about it. I didn't speak specifically to any of my clients, but I see the signs that they propose, and so I know on a regular basis, I know what's important to them. Okay. And my biggest client, Carpianato, has several shopping centers
down here, yeah.
Down in your neck of the woods, and you know, the limits would be very difficult for them where they have 15, 20 businesses in a shopping plaza to tell them that they got 50 square feet. I suggest to you that that really needs to be looked at.
Okay. And then I asked the planning board the same thing. While you were doing all of this and making these changes, was it basically, as you had mentioned earlier, it's looking at other entities, other cities and towns, and seeing what they had? Was there any question to any business owners personally or to residents of the city as these were being developed? Or is it just, you know, having looked at other people's ordinances, other towns?
Mr. Davis, can you answer that on behalf of the...
Well, we had the earlier public hearing, and we got input from
Yes.
Mr. Jacoby, as well as Charlie Adler and some others.
Yes.
We did get some informal feedback.
Okay.
We have been working on with site plan review with specific signs with primarily Capernato properties, and with some of the pylon, you know, so we adapted some of the things that we put into the site plan into the ordinance and application. You know, so I thought we were on the road to, you know, large application, large signs, wall signs, you know, depending on the size of the business, that steps up. So I don't, you know, so we're a little bit at, you know, I don't have a step-by-step rebuttal for Attorney Jacoby's presentation, but all of that was addressed in the way we put the ordinance together. So if you give me a week, I can probably come back and give you an argument as to why, in application, each one, a lot of Attorney Jacoby's points have been addressed. So, you know, I mean, it's, you know, I wasn't anticipating this type of.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I respond
Yes.
also? I mean, I think that perhaps unlike Jack, I don't have these business clients, so I'm not thinking of things through their eyes. I'm thinking of things through my role as a resident and plus a long-term member of the planning board. When CVS came before us, I think it was actually before my time, but Gene McNeary told me that the planning board at the time pleaded with them not to put up signs that would have such a detrimental, it would pose such a detrimental problem with the character of the neighborhood, and they wouldn't do it. We had no teeth, we had no regulation to force them, and so I think our whole perspective is as residents and as planning board members, and we see signs all the time. So.
Thank you.
Now, I'll give you an example. Attorney Jacoby brought up AutoZone on Pleasant Street. Okay, now, a couple of doors down, you got an O'Reilly's going in. Now, that was subject to site plan review, and we worked with them to adjust the facade of the building to make it more compatible with the neighborhood, with stone and lights coming, you know, a more residential type look. Get rid of all the large signage, and they agreed. So I haven't seen the final result yet, still on the construction, but I assume that O'Reilly's, I assume would do just as well as AutoZone with a lot less sign aggravation on Pleasant Street. So we think it can work. So, but it's a give and take.
Well, I just want to say, I think it's, that's why it's been taking 12 years, Councilor Conti, is that there's a lot to it. There really is a lot to it, and it's unbelievable how much time you've put into it, and a great deal of work, and obviously this is something that maybe needs just a little more tweaking, that's all.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Jacoby on his presentation dealing with the sign ordinance? Okay,
I know I
thank you.
took up a lot of your time tonight. Thank you for listening to me.
Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition? Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition? Is there anyone here to speak neither for nor against? Is there anyone here to speak neither for nor against? Mr. Rachel, are you on?
I was going to ask respectfully if there's an opportunity that I might speak in favor, even though I'm allowed to turn.
Actually, we closed that part of it? Okay. Good, thank you.
Is there an opportunity for a very brief rebuttal?
No, we usually do not allow, rebuttals at this time. But I know that both boards, will be taking the information in the public hearing, will be, revisiting as part of the deliberations. One of the next things we're going to find out is whether or not both boards want this closed. So that's where it's going to now. Councilor Cooper?
Couldn't the gentleman speak neither for nor against?
Yes, you could. Right, that's what we're doing right now.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. For the record, my name is Gary Erasian. I'm the city's Director of Planning and Development, and unfortunately, I'm in a position to speak neither for nor against, but I think we know where my heart is. First of all, I want to say, time after time, whenever consultants, engineering firms call the office, they're always asking, hey, what do you do for signage in this city? So no one comes into our city blindly thinking we could do whatever you want to do. They're always calling Gary, or they're always calling Stephanie, trying to learn what it is we need to do in your community for signage. We have nothing to tell them other than you have a setback. So it isn't just Kentucky Fried Chicken wanting to do what it wants to do, or O'Reilly's or whatever. Their consulting team always works with us to develop what the product is going to be, and we always tell them we don't have an ordinance. So I want to first say, they don't just blindly come in asking the board. They're advanced people, contact us, stormwater, all the issues, signage. So we get those questions. We just have nothing to tell them. The other thing I'm going to respectfully ask the council and the planning board, if you can just indulge me for 1 minute for some historical context. In the early 1950s, right after the end of World War II, if you recall, there was what was called the development of the industrial military complex. Early 1950s. The tip of that spear was GM, General Motors. They were making millions and billions. And what did they always say? What was their slogan, if you recall? Just kind of emanated from me as I heard Mr. Jacoby talk. What's good for GM is good for the United States. I don't agree with that. What's good for Kentucky Fried Chicken may not be good for the city of Attleboro. What's good for AutoZone may not be good for the city of Attleboro. What's good for the city of Attleboro is the ordinances and legislation that the planning board and ultimately the city council passes. We have control of that, and I don't mean control for the sake of control, but control in terms of where we want to go for direction. I don't necessarily want to go in the direction and see the colonel's face on a 25 by 35. Maybe the colonel's face doesn't have to be as big. Maybe we don't have to have as much advertising. The point of the matter is we're trying to reduce clutter. We should have the control of our destiny, not corporate America. The other part of that historical complex is, if you recall, we had the same issues when we were going to do the wetlands ordinance, and what a wonderful thing that's been for our community, for all the questions. Although councilors still get, they call my office, is a microcosm of the questions the councilors used to ask my office years ago. Why? Because we've made it a better place. We've got a wetlands ordinance, this order, people understand the rules. Same thing for site plan review. Sure, there were some growing pains, but over time, it turned out to be one of the best things we've ever done. The stormwater ordinance. I remember this council, councils before you, predecessors, calling myself, my senior planner, the conservation agent, issue after issue after issue. And what happened? We took those issues, we wrote an ordinance, took about a year to adopt, but it turned out to be a good thing. Well, if you apply all these ordinances, it's not control for the sake of control because we want to tell everybody what to do. It's not. Because for every one thing we do, it affects another neighbor down the street. Those were the concerns we would get, because it was like pushing water down the street. So the same thing with the sign ordinance. We've got nothing right now. I mean, we're starting from zero, and I have to tell you, perspective is a very interesting thing. The very presentation that was just shown for the graphics, I could use for the very reason to say that's why we need a sign ordinance. I mean, typically you could take that and say these are the kinds of reasons if you're going to do a workshop to say what not to do. That's clearly a presentation, in my humble opinion, of what not to do. It's clutter. And my thought here is, it's not to say to stop everything and you have to reduce things. You know, there was some contradictions, but I'm not going to pull all those out. But we're not talking about homogeneity, that everything has to be cookie cutter, like Big Brother from 1984, and it has to look like this. What we're trying to do is reduce the amount of clutter, still allow the creativity, but just not as much. What's wrong with that? It's no different than any of the other ordinances that this honorable body has adopted. Over time, there's a little issues. Is it too much? Is it too little? But we've all grown to understand the implications it has for our residents. I think it's all been done for the better. Is everything 100% perfect? Of course not. Just like this, if there happens to be contradictions, there happen to be issues where left and right they bump into, of course we're going to come back and modify that. Why would we not do that? But not to do something is worse than doing something. I think we're in the right direction. And with those, I conclude my thoughts.
Are there any questions for Mr. Rajan? Councilor Hagley.
Hi, thank you, Gary, for speaking. During, in this whole ordinance, is there a time limit? Did you, for the signs to stay up, say if the property, to take them down?
Any sign that's up right now, there is no mechanism that within 30 days you have to take a sign down.
Right.
Just like anything else that's non-conforming, it continues to be non-conforming.
Right, and then under the current one that's proposed, will there be a time limit?
No, there isn't any. It is, if it's, something doesn't fit the ordinance the way it is right now, it just continues, as long as it's existing, just like any other grandfather rights, it continues to
I
exist.
guess end of life.
Pardon me?
End of life. The sign falls over.
Yeah, but no, she's asking me if there's anything in the ordinance right now that says within 30, for example, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you mean, for example, within 30 days of the adoption of this ordinance, all non-conforming signs have to come down. If that's your question, the answer is categorically no.
Okay, and then what if a business leaves and they leave a sign?
Right.
Is that going to be addressed? Because I know I've talked to you about this before, even where they say the old head knees over here, the Chinese, and the guy next to him, the cobbler. And people have asked me that question.
Yeah, well, it's a 10-page document. I'm going to be quite honest with you. I don't have everything burned to memory, but I think there are provisions in that says over a certain period of time, if a business is abandoned, and we are very liberal with the definition of abandonment. I'm going to give you an example of that definition. But there is an amount of time that within, I forget off the top of my head, that if there's an abandonment, because there's no business there, yeah, you need to bring a sign down. The term abandonment, the way the Zoning Board of Appeals has always used it, the way we have non-conforming situations right now, if you have a business, hasn't been open for X amount of time, but you continue to keep it active in as much as by just paying the electric bill to keep the light on, that's how liberal the board is to say, okay, we'll allow that as not being abandoned. You pay the real estate bills. You pay for your electric bill. You pay for your water bill. We've allowed that kind of latitude for an applicant to come in and say, even though I have not had business in that store, there's a couple of examples on Thatcher Street where we haven't had business, hasn't been open, no occupancy permit, but the fact that the owner has paid an electric bill, and we've said, show us the electric bill. They go, here you go, electric bill for the last 2 years. Even Mr. Conti, when he was on the zoning board, right? So we go back with that latitude. We allow a great deal of latitude on demonstrating some activity to minimize the window on the abandonment, to say, yep, you're still active, okay, you can continue with the grandfathered rights or the non-conforming aspect of that. So we actually look for reason to, well, that's what we should do. We're a permit granting authority. We're not a permit denying authority. We're a permit granting authority. So I think we go to extremes to help, whether it's a resident, an applicant, someone out of town, a business, to manifest to get that permit.
Okay, you all set?
Thank you very much, because that's one of the biggest questions, and I agree with you as a resident also. Some of the residents are vocal about
the sign ordinance and coming forward and speaking, and that was the biggest thing that I got was signs being left up and left up and left up, and the deplorable condition
Yes.
also.
So for that purpose, whether it's conforming or non-conforming, there is a provision. I just don't know off the top of my head. I will gladly send an email to Linda in that answer, and maybe she could, if that's okay with Mr. Cook? Okay.
I know, I just wanted to
Yes.
have it verbally
Okay.
said on
All right.
camera.
Thank you, Counselor.
Councilor Blair?
If a business was sold, Gary, does that start the process all over again, as far as signs are concerned?
And they continue with the same, like if it's a restaurant to another restaurant, or?
Yeah, for instance, I sold my place of business 6 years ago, and there
Yeah.
was a sign on the corner, a pole.
You sold it and it continues? Yeah, absolutely.
Not as a garage. That's zoned, well, it's zoned business. Would they be required to conform to the new zoning ordinance as far as signs are concerned, or would they be grandfathered?
Sure. That's indicative of anything that is non-conforming and changes to something else. In some instances, Counsel, the answer is going to be yes, and in some instances, I'm going to be candid with you, the answer is going to be no. I can't give you every conceivable variation.
Yeah, but there must be a baseline somewhere.
Right, so generally, the answer would be yes, but I cannot tell you categorically that in every instance, it's not a problem. Of course, there's going to be a situation where you lose your grandfather rights, but that's indicative of any change.
Your answer is yes, is they would have to conform to the new ordinance.
I said, yes, they do, and in some instances, no, they don't have to. That's what I'm saying is, we would look at the forensics, look at the nature of what they're asking for, and in some instances, we're going to say, you're fine, your grandfather, move forward. And in some instances, again, I got to be candid, we're going to say, nope, it's substantial enough a change where the new ordinance would apply. So it's yes and no.
In the business itself, not on the property.
Yes, I understand.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I
If
think,
it went from a garage to a restaurant. say.
right.
So definitely they would have to conform.
No, again,
No?
if a garage has a sign that's 25 square feet,
Yeah.
right? And a restaurant comes in, and they want to maintain that, they wouldn't need any modification for it, because it's the same square footage. I'm trying to give you a basic example.
Okay.
But I want to say in some instances yes and some no. We'd have to look at what the proposal is. So I can't just say in every instance, they have to come in for a variance. And in every instance, oh, they're completely grandfathered. No, there's going to be some that fall in either case, depending on the extent.
Sound like a politician.
Well, I'm not. I'm just trying to be an answer, because sometimes there just isn't a yes or a no.
All
Sometimes.
right, all right, that's fine.
Any other questions
I'm
for
not trying to talk.
Mr.
I'm
Ajian?
sorry.
Councilor Delicio?
Gary, always good to see you. Quick question
Same here,
for you.
Councilman.
So, well, you're neither for nor against at this point. Can you talk a little bit
Wink,
about
wink.
what's your thought on the overlay districts?
I don't like it at all. That came up for discussion. Mr. Denisi was very kind to say he came up for discussion. Let me tell you, I was the 800-pound or the 1,600-pound or the 10,000-pound gorilla in the room. I'll be quite candid with you. I don't like the idea only because I don't think it's appropriate in this case. The reason for that is, if one thinks, I'm not saying you, if one thinks this is subjective, what are the ground rules of an overlay to say that the general business zone on Route 1 is any different from the general business zone on 123? Of course, you're going to have opinions on it. You're going to have lots of opinions. That's the whole point of this. This is great. You're going to have all these perspectives. Try to codify that now. Try to codify. The previous spokesman said 152 North Main Street is way different than 123 on Pleasant. What is that, within a quarter, well, depending on how the angle goes, but right next to one another, if you may, okay? So we're not even talking downtown Attleboro with South Attleboro, we're talking downtown Attleboro. Of course there is, right? Who's going to take that subjective arguments for either one, those differences, put those down in some logical thought process to say, well, these completely stand out, these completely stand out, and hence, 2 GB zones, 123 and 118, and let's have an overlay district on that. Can it be done? I got to tell you, that's going to take forever and a day to get all those subjective thoughts. You're going to put them on the wall, strengths, weaknesses, threats, opportunities, and 5 people are going to say yes to this, 6 to that, and then if you tweak one, okay, well, no, I'm going to jump on this side. Well, if you modify this one, no, you're going to get 3 more on this side. it would take forever. I don't think the distinction among those areas is so clear that an overlay would work. GB is GB is GB. Let's start off with this. If there are any tweaks, let's go from tweaks to bugs, from bugs to bigger things like that in the ordinance. I don't think we're going to wait for the council or the planning board to say, because Stephanie and I are in the trenches with the zoning board with this stuff all the time, we're going to say, wow, there's a glaring mistake. And I'll be the first one to agree with Mr. Jacoby, if that's the case, to say, Guy was right, we got to get in there. So right now, we've got nothing. Let's get this on. I think it's a good idea. And if there's any glaring problems with it, we'll be the first ones here, as I've always said to you, to come before the council and the planning board to correct that. And the overlay answer is I'm completely against that. But if that's what you ultimately come to in a couple of years and you want us to work, we're staff, we will accommodate that like anything else.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Ration? Okay, thank you.
Good night, thank you.
Is there anyone else who can speak neither for nor against? Anyone else who speak neither for nor against? Seeing none, Councilor Hall and Mr. Donati, what are your thoughts on closing this public hearing?
I'm also in agreement
Okay.
with close public hearings.
So again, based on the testimony presented, I want to thank all of you who came out tonight and shared your thoughts. And based on the recommendations of both the Chair of the Planning Board, Mr. Donati, and the Chair of the Zoning and Lands Committee, Councilor Hall, I am going to declare this public hearing closed. So these matters will now be back before the two committees. For those watching, the Planning Board has to make a recommendation to the council before the council can act upon this measure. So I do want to thank you all for coming out tonight. Planning Board, you continue with your public hearings
Yes,
or other
yeah.
business? So if you have business before the Planning Board, you can follow them next door to the annex. I do want to thank all the Planning Board members for coming in this evening.
Now, if we could have just done political science.
I know, that's what I was thinking about the whole time.
They know in certain areas you can come, and everybody's in their certain areas.
So that does conclude our joint public hearing to the Planning Board this evening. We're now going on to planning hearings before the City Council. We have 4 of them scheduled, and Mr. Withers, would you read the notice for the first public hearing, please?
Yes, thank you. This next public hearing is relative to the application for a new Class 2 auto license from Raymar Auto Sales, 923 Washington Street, Attleboro, Mass. for 33 display spaces and 7 customer park spaces.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak in favor? Again, if you come forward, please. Thank you for your patience this evening.
Thank you.
By
Good
the way,
evening.
could I have your name and address for the record, please?
Raymond Clive.
Raymond Clyde, okay. We have his address, correct?
Raymond what? Yeah. On the application, it should
It's on
be.
it's on the application.
I don't have the application.
You don't have it with you? I have it. I have it, it's okay.
Right, you're in the office.
Yeah, everybody should have the application. Thank you. So you're the spelling of it? Mr. Withers?
KLEIB. 58 Level Acres Road.
Right. Yes, so what information can you present to us in favor of your application?
Oh, well, I have few business in Rhode Island. I live in Attleboro, so I decided to open a business in Attleboro. I've been living in Attleboro since 1994, and I chose the car dealer business, and I rented the spot, and I'd like to start a new business.
Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Conti?
Raymond, you said you owned a used car business in the past?
No, I have different business in Rhode Island. I'm in a restaurant business.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I'm in the restaurant business, and I have
Restaurant.
yeah, and I have a garage in Rhode Island too.
And you have a
Garage.
repair garage in Rhode Island?
Yeah,
And how long have you owned a repair garage in Rhode Island?
4 years
And how long have you lived in Attleboro?
since 1994.
Very good. And you're the principal in that garage in Rhode Island? You're the main owner of that garage in Rhode Island?
Yes,
And you'll be the main owner of this garage in
yes.
Attleboro?
This is yes, dealership. You mean?
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Mr. President. That concludes my questions.
Well, Councilor Flicker, did you have a question?
His
As I
question.
said, Councilor Hall?
I just want to say thank you for bringing the business to Attleboro. Thank you.
I'm glad to, thank you.
Yeah, hopefully something.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the gentleman? Okay, thank you for coming in.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Is there anyone else here to speak in favor? Anyone else here to speak in favor? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Is there anyone here to speak neither for nor against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Hearing none, let's see, Councilor Parika. Because you and I are sharing the,
License.
excuse me, you're the acting chair of the License Committee.
That'd be correct.
Do you see, would you like me to close this public hearing?
Yes, please. There's no need to keep it open here later.
Okay. Do you want to talk about what's going to happen next?
Thank you for coming in this evening. So we did just close your public hearing. We will discuss it during our committee meeting next week, and I have the expectation we'll vote it out of committee. When is our next full council meeting?
About 2 weeks from today.
It is 2 weeks from this evening. So in 2 weeks, I'll vote it in front of the full council. Shortly after that, the mayor will sign the vote, and the city clerk will send out your license. All right? Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to declare that public hearing closed, and we'll go on to the reading of the next item, please.
Yes, the next public hearing is for an underground fuel storage tank license from C&B Attleboro LLC, 10 Green Street, Pawtucket, Rhode Island, for a self-service gasoline/diesel fuel sales with a retail store at 466 Washington Street, Attleboro, for 2 underground 24,000-gallon and 8,000-gallon gasoline tanks and 1 8,000-gallon diesel tank.
Thank you. Is there anybody here to speak in favor?
President Cook, members of the council, Jack Jacoby, attorney with offices 144 Bank Street. I represent Irving Oil, which is the actual applicant, despite the name that you may have heard on the application. This property is currently the Lincoln School. It was, to my understanding, when Hill Roberts and Hyman Fine were built, this school and the Washington School and I think the Thatcher School were all taken out of commission.
That's just still there.
No. Well, at least the Washington and the Lincoln.
Yeah, it's out there.
Yeah. So this is the site of the Lincoln School. It's bounded by Barrow Street on this side, the McDonald's is over here, one is over here, the Honeydew and the post office are over here, and this is Newport Avenue, 1A. The property is under agreement with Mr. Hallal as the seller, and a developer named Richard Bakari is going to be the purchaser. My client has a lease with Mr. Bakari to operate the fuel station there. So the proposal is to knock the building down. I don't know if you've seen it recently, but it most recently was used for paintball and laser tag. I understand it's not very pretty inside anymore. I've talked a couple of times with the Historic Commission. They're not pleased to see it come down, but we have worked out an arrangement with them where they can take out doors and door frames and other things that they think would be useful in other historic renovation projects around the city. And I also understand the fire department has interest after they're finished in going up and doing some training exercises on it, the same way that they did with the Hearth and Kettle when that came down, to give, I think, the younger firefighters a chance to take an axe to a roof or whatever they do to pretend they're fighting a fire. So this is a very simple arrangement. It's the typical convenience store. The pumps, there are 5 pumps, which means 10 fueling stations. We have been before the zoning board. They have given us a special permit to operate this as a gas station. We have been before the Conservation Commission, and they have approved the stormwater retention system, which is here. There's no entrance onto Route 1. The entrances are on Barrows and, excuse me, it's a Newport Avenue. The entrances are on Route 1 and Barrows Street. We also, we have our engineer here tonight who can do a better job than I can in talking about the fire suppression systems in the canopies and the tanks. And so Frank, do you want to come up and introduce yourself? And
Mr. President, for the record, Frank Montero with MHF Design Consultants, New Hampshire, representing everyone.
Okay, could you spell your last name, please, Mr. Withers?
Monteiro, Frank.
Thank you.
As John mentioned, the overhead canopy is located here parallel with Barrow Street. It'd be a typical self-service facility. We would be obtaining a self-serve permit from the state fire marshal. We need this fuel storage license in order to make that application. Part of that approval with the state fire marshal, it will have an overhead fire suppression system in the canopy deck, as well as containment grooves around each dispenser and the concrete islands. The proposed underground fuel storage tanks are on this side of the site here. There's 2 proposed tanks, total storage volume of 40,000 gallons. Each tank has 2 compartments in it, split into 12,000 gallons and 8,000 gallons. So one tank will have 12,000 gallon regular, the other compartment would have 8,000 gallon diesel, and the second tank would also have 12,000 gallons regular and 8,000 gallons super. So basically those tanks would be piped underground to these dispensers. Tanks are all double wall fiberglass, state-of-the-art equipment. The fuel piping that connects the tanks to the dispensers is double wall piping. All of this design meets with DEP storage tank regulations. Latest leak detection equipment for the system, the console unit at the convenience store for the manager to monitor that leak detection system. We've got various spill containment measures in the plan that we reviewed with the zoning board and stormwater permit. That's about it. I'll conclude. Answer any questions you might have on that.
Okay. Are there any questions for the gentleman? Mrs. Klein? Mr. Cardy?
no, I'll let it go.
You go, John. Okay.
The tanks are the typical double-walled tanks.
They're all double wall fiberglass. There's interstitial space between the walls. That is minor protection system.
May I ask about the, again, fire department, had you viewed these plans?
Yes. I spoke to Chief Charest actually yesterday. He did everything. He's fine with everything.
Have we signed off on these?
He said he was fine. He was going to try to reach somebody to convey that to you folks.
I don't see this presented, that's why I was wondering at this point, on the application. So that's why I was wondering, is that something that's going to be forthcoming? Because I didn't see on the paperwork that I have, I didn't see the
Yeah,
fire
I
department.
I spoke to him on the phone. He said he was going to reach out to the city council. I don't know if he writes a letter. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, no, we have not gotten that yet, so, Council Cooper.
Thank you. There's no signature on the license application.
Right, that's what I was noting.
Yeah.
I think it wasn't sure if he should sign that until you approve the license, or if that gets signed out.
If you need something signed, we have actually the signatory here tonight. We can cure that.
No,
Council Cooper,
if I may.
yes.
What I'm specifically looking for in this case before I can render a decision is a signature on this like we have had in the
Right,
past
right.
from the fire chief or his designee.
Right, and that's why I was asking the question. I didn't see it on the paperwork that I had here, and that's why I wanted to make sure, because that's something we always look for.
We'll follow up with him
Okay.
tomorrow. I know that there was a phone conversation yesterday. Perhaps he didn't get a chance to get the paperwork done. We'll follow up with him in a
Sure,
phone conversation.
thank you.
Right, yeah, that's a major thing we need. We need something in writing, we just can't take the verbal, so.
He did say when I spoke to him that they don't often get applications like this anymore, and I think this might have been his first.
Okay.
We'll take care of that.
Okay, thank you. Council Reynolds.
Are there any state traffic decisions made as why it's coming out on Barrows and on Route, on Washington versus on Newport Avenue?
It has
the
to do with the
entrance?
topography, the slope, and where we could put the drainage structure.
And there's not many residents really around that area, but you didn't get any feedback from anyone that they didn't want it there, or any kind of blowback from that?
I've not heard
Because
from anyone.
Barrows is really thin, is it being, it's not a huge, I mean, is that being widened that street, Barrows?
No?
Now, in terms of the driveways, Mass DOT has to approve this driveway on Washington Street. We've had a few meetings with them and received their input, and they have no objections to what we're showing on this plan.
Felt comfortable, and they felt comfortable with the width of Barrows?
Yeah, well, Barrows is under the town's jurisdiction. So we did go through the planning board with the width of that.
You did?
And we actually got a waiver to make it a little wider for the tanker truck circulation, which is in this pattern here. So we need it a little wider for the truck to get out.
Barrows
On
was
Barrows.
a little wide,
Yeah, so the driveways are a little wider than would otherwise be allowed to
but the road is
accommodate that.
staying the same.
But the grade changes from Route 1 down to Newport, and it goes down. And so the natural place to put the green spot was where it is, and that's where the drainage structure
Sure,
is.
okay.
And one other thing I forgot to say is that there will be, depending on the time of day, between 2 and 4 employees working there, and we expect a total of 12 to 15 jobs to be created by this. So it'll look and operate just like every other typical convenience store gas station that you've ever seen.
Are there any other questions for Councilor Hagan?
Thank you, sorry, I had to use the ladies' room. Is this the McDonald's, so the location, is this where the old Lincoln School is? Is that what?
The Lincoln School, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I was.
McDonald's is across Barrows, and Honeydew, and I think it's the post office are on the other side behind it.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the speaker? Okay, anything else you or Mr. Otero want to add, Joel said?
No, I think we've covered it all.
Okay, is there anybody else from your team that's going to make a presentation this evening?
Mr. McLaughlin from Irving is here, but I don't know that he has anything relevant to add at this point.
Okay, no, I would invite him if he wants to, but if he doesn't, that's fine too. So, I just didn't want to move on to other people if, asking those in favor, if there were some members of your team to make a presentation, so. Okay, very good, thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? Anyone else to speak in favor? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak in opposition? Is there anyone here to speak neither for nor against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Hearing none. Councilor Parika, this is in the License Committee jurisdiction. Do you see any need to keep this public hearing open?
I do not.
Thank you very much. So again, based on testimony and also on the nomination of the acting chair of the License Committee, I'm going to declare that public hearing closed. Thank you for coming in. And we'll go on to the reading for the, at this point, it'll just go back into committee. That paperwork, I would ask for the fire department that you submit that follow-up and get that,
tomorrow.
and submit that at your earliest convenience. Right?
Thank you.
Yeah, it's, Mr. Jacoby, I would suggest that perhaps if you get the paperwork, you submit it through the city clerk, because that office is manned, all day, whereas my office at the moment is not manned all day.
Right, we'll.
Okay, so that way, just, if you don't mind sending the stuff to Mr. Withers, that would be fine. Okay?
If I may,
Yes.
if you could just send me an email once that's.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Jacoby, once that is taken care of and you're heading your way to see Mr. Withers, if you throw me an email to let me know that that's coming my way, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Or I can do that too.
Yeah, or actually,
That's fine.
yeah.
I'd like that from you.
I'd be happy to do.
Thank you very much.
All right, very good. Thank you. So we're going to a reading of the third public hearing for this evening.
Public hearing relative to the city's capital improvement program for fiscal year 2018 to 2022.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak in favor? Yes, relative to the proposed capital improvement program for the next 5 years. Is there anyone here to speak in favor? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak in opposition? Is there anyone here to speak neither for nor against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Hearing none, Mr. Conti, do you see any need to keep this public hearing open?
Mr. President, I believe we'll be setting a historical precedent by closing the public hearing on capital improvements on October 3rd, 2017.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to declare that public hearing closed for the reasons just stated, and we'll go into a reading of the fourth and final public hearing for this evening.
Public hearing In accordance with, excuse me, Section 5-11 remaining loan order funds to appropriate $268,804.16 from Fund East and West Wells at Wading River of the financing uses, to fund Route 95 mains of the financing sources, and to appropriate $65,214.48 from Hoppin Hill Dam and seawall repair of the financing uses, to fund Route 95 mains of the financing sources, to fund the construction of the Route 95 water main project.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this item? Anyone here to speak in favor?
I'll just say that.
All right, are you speaking in favor of this? Yes, would you come to the podium, please? And then if you could just give us your name and address for the record?
Name's Matthew Crotty. Address is 7 Ides Hill Lane.
Could you spell your last name, please?
CROTTY.
CROTTY, and the address again?
7 Ides Hill.
7 Ides Hill,
IDES,
okay.
The lane.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Originally, I just came here because I thought there was more to do with the water department's budget, but since I spent the time to stay here, I just figured I'd speak in favor of this motion due to the fact of the importance of the water system and for the city of Attleboro.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Mr. Conti?
So, Mr. Crotty, I just want to know if you're aware that this is a Mass DOT project that we're actually partnering with. So this is really not a City of Attleboro project. It's more contributing the money to an engineering momentum that's already underway, being marshaled by the Mass DOT. And that these funds that we're talking about here are funds that were left over from the retained earnings that went into the enterprise fund to work that. So you understand all that?
I understand.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for any other questions? Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor? Anyone else here to speak in favor? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak in opposition? Is there anybody here to speak neither for nor against? Anyone to speak neither for nor against? Hearing none. This is currently before the Budget and Appropriations Committee. Councilor Hayden, do you see any need to keep this public hearing open?
Mr. President?
Yes.
It's probably important to explain why this is a bit unusual. And it's also, we are, the city is spending $268,000 and perhaps just giving some reference as to why now we have to do it this way, I think would be important instead of waiting 2 weeks.
Okay.
For the committee meeting, for the chair of the budget committee to explain why it had to go through this process, where in the past these hadn't had to go through this process.
Okay.
It's from what I understand, it's the Modernization Act, which is unusual that the department head's not here to also speak in favor of this, where I think if there was any question from the council, he would have, and I'm sure he will come to or provide some guidance to us through the chair about this project. I'm in complete support of it, and I think it is in conjunction with, but it is city money. So this is city money left over from other projects that's going to a project that is very important to connect the water from one side of the highway to the other is the long and short of it. But I think not saying that sort of, I did get a couple of calls about it to same people that I hear from frequently on these things, but nevertheless, I did get 2 separate calls about it, so I'll save you those calls, and now people know why we're doing it, but it is a bit unique than what we've seen from these things in the past. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. Yeah, this is, this is in accordance, as is mentioned in the notice here, with Section 5-11 of the ordinance. A few weeks ago, in our communication, there was additional information, and Ms. Gould was the author of them. Ms. Gould had a prior commitment, so she could not be here tonight, by the way. But this is all covered. This is all covered by ordinance. I remember working, I think, on revising this ordinance when I was the chair of the ordinance committee in the early days of my career.
Actually, if I don't mean to interrupt you,
that's fine.
Mr. Cook, but I did talk to Deb, and I just sort of had a bit of a palpitation, because I remember her telling me she was going on vacation to Las Vegas with another, have we heard from her?
Yes, I
She's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. She didn't leave till
Right,
today.
till today.
Okay,
Today.
thank you.
Yeah.
Great, perfect. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I had,
I asked that this morning, Mark.
I just remember her standing in that back hallway telling me that that's what she was doing last week when I came to ask her about it, and
Right.
I skipped a beat for a minute, so thank you.
Right. Yes, Councilor Carney.
If I could,
Yes.
to complete Councilor Cooper's agenda, is that we did have Paul Kennedy appear before the council a couple of months ago to explain how the pipe was broken, how the water was being supplied to that
Right.
neighborhood. And so it's not the case, I don't want the public to think that this hasn't been vetted. The public should understand that this is fully vetted, but it's simply the Municipal Modernization Act, which mandates all projects over $50,000 now must have a public hearing. I was at the Massachusetts Department of Revenue Municipal Law Seminar with Deborah Gould last week, when we sat together and talked about this in detail, and that's why there was a long explanation last week in our committee meeting, because it was really fresh in my mind. So I guess I apologize for creating a misconception that it wasn't a city project, but it is a Mass DOT project, and it's a very unique project, and I don't think the public should have any concern. In fact, it's going to bring a benefit to that neighborhood. It's finally going to have a good supply of clean water, also for fire protection, which has been an issue. And that concludes my comments.
Yeah, the key thing is, for those watching at home, and again, I was involved with writing this ordinance back, and as I said, in the early days of my time on the planning board, on the city council, for joining us from the planning board. And the major thing to keep in mind with this is that we talk a lot about transparency and so forth. Part of the original provision, this predates the Modernization Act and so forth, but the idea being that any funds that are left over from a capital project, they're not automatically swept into something else. It has to come for a vote of the council, and it has to be a 2/3 vote of the council, just to make sure there isn't any, misappropriation or being used for other reasons, or, we over request the amount of a loan. There are specific guidelines in place as the key message, for the citizens, who are tuning in relative to items like this, that there is a procedure in place to make sure that the money that was appropriated is properly dealt with if there are funds remaining. So, okay, so as I mentioned, Councilor Higney, given I've asked for testimony, we've had one person speak. Do you see any need to continue this
I
public
don't
hearing
know if
open?
I need to see if I need a committee meeting on this now. Honestly, we did call on Councilor Conte, and I just jest. It's all in good fun. No, I do not need to hold.
So I'm going to declare that public hearing closed, and that does conclude our public hearings for this evening. I'm going to entertain a motion for a brief recess.
Second.
Before we get into the next part, thank you. The motion's in order. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We're in recess at 8:48. Let's come back about, within 10 minutes, please. Call the council meeting back to order at 9 o'clock. We're going to go on to a reading of the communications, some of the mayor's communication.
October 3rd, 2017. Dear municipal councilors, I respectfully submit a communication from Library Director Joan Pilkington Smith regarding the receipt of an LSTA-funded grant, Mind in the Making grant, in the amount of approximately $10,000. The library will be working cooperatively with local agencies to bring interactive sensory programming to preschool-aged children and their families. There is no match for this grant. In accordance with Chapter 1, Section 12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, I hereby request your honorable body to approve expending such funds in any future grant amendments by the Attleboro Public Library. Copies in your packets.
Personnel and Human Services Committee, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from Chief of Police Kyle P. Hagney excuse me, regarding the need for additional funding to train and outfit 4 police recruits due to unexpected vacancies. The tuition to attend a full-time police academy for each officer is $3,700. In addition, according to the police union contract, each new employee shall be granted an initial uniform allowance sufficient for the purchase of the uniforms required by the Police Recruit Training Academy. The cost for the uniforms and equipment for each officer is $1,000. As part of the hiring process, these 4 recruit police officers will need medical screening at a cost of $1,346.87 per employee. Each police officer will also need to be issued a set of police badges. The associated cost for breast badges and hat badges is $167.15. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body to transfer $24,856.08 from account Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to the following: $14,800 to account police tuition and books, $4,000 to account police uniforms, $5,387.48 to police medical consultation, and $668.60 to account police supply. Upon approval, the available balance in reserve fund for transfer will be $205,952.96. Copies in your package.
Public Safety and Emergency Management Committee, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from Election Office Manager Mary Ann Drain regarding the need for funds to cover additional costs associated with a special state primary and special state elections that were not included in the fiscal year 2018 budget. Additionally, funds are needed to cover the salary for the new election office manager being trained by the retiring office manager until the end of the calendar year, and for the difference in longevity pay. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body transfer $53,077 from account Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to the following: $20,538 to account election salaries, election, $515 to account election rental of buildings, $2,800 to account election professional services, $2,300 to account election printing and repro, $4,888 to account election police poll, $1,300 to account election advertising, $15,900 to account election salaries, and $200 to account election longevity. Upon approval, the available balance in reserve fund for transfer will be $157,511.96. Copies in your packets.
Ordinance, Elections, and Legislative Matters Committee, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from the Chief of Police, Kyle P. Hagney, regarding the need for funds to purchase T-shirts for the DARE program. In the past, the Attleboro Rotary Club graciously donated the funding to purchase these shirts. However, the Rotary Club has elected to discontinue purchasing the graduating students' DARE T-shirts. Therefore, I hereby request your honorable body transfer $4,149.90 to account Citywide Reserve Fund for transfer to account Police DARE T-shirts. Upon approval, the available balance in reserve fund for transfer will be $153,362.06. Copies in your packets.
Public Safety and Emergency Management Committee, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from Health Agent Alan Perry regarding the receipt of a Sustainable Materials Recovery Program municipal grant from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. The amount of the grant this fiscal year is approximately $42,000 in recycling dividend funds. The funds do not have to be spent in the fiscal year received and may be carried over to future years. In accordance with Chapter 1, Section 12 of the revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, I hereby request your honorable body to approve expending such funds in any future grant amendments. Copies in your packets.
Budget and Appropriations Committee, please.
I respectfully submit a communication from Superintendent of Schools David Sawyer regarding the following donations. 3 complete sets of field hockey goalie equipment with a total value of $5,593.65 from the South Attleboro Girls Recreation Association and the Rebecca Lynn Whitefield Foundation to be allocated to the varsity, junior varsity, and freshman field hockey teams. 35 neodymium grade 42 2 inches by 1 inch by ½ inch bar magnets and 1,032 solar cells from community member and retired electrical engineer Paul LaPierre for a total estimated value of $1,029. In accordance with section revised ordinances of the City of Attleboro, I hereby request your honorable body to accept this generous donation to the